Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports for today's first live show since Saturday. Actually, since Saturday, first live show I've done since about I think Thursday last week, actually. But we are live for the Rugby News live show, which we try and do throughout the sort of usual. Basically, we try to do this on the weekdays, and we try to sort of in between the live watch-alongs and all the news and stuff like that. It's just nice to be able to join during the week, be able to have these sort of shows where we can just sort of talk about what news is circulating, what's happening in and around the rugby world, and just chat really. Just talk about what's going on, what are the latest stories, what do we think, and just sort of try and get everybody else's views on exactly what's going on in the rugby world. We've got quite a lot to talk about tonight because we have so much to sort of catch up on. We haven't been live for quite a few days, and so we're going to be basically sort of just catching up over the last couple of days, talking about the Rugby Championship, talking about the Queensland restrictions that are currently happening at the moment. We're going to be talking about Ian Foster signing a new contract. We're going to be talking about the Sigma Lions coaching setup, the fact that they're going through a current restructuring system. We're going to be talking about Courtney Hassan, talking about Cheslin Colby, talking about Stedman Khans, talking about the Craven Week, as well as the Bright Rock Players' Choice Awards. So much to come over in the next sort of half an hour to about 45 minutes, depending on sort of how we go. But before we do sort of really get into it and really sort of talk about exactly what's happening in and around the world, please do smash like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Today we went past 6,400 subscribers, which was quite cool. And before I go to the comments and see exactly who's hanging out, so please do go and let me know who's watching. Let me know where you're watching from. Let me know if the usual in the chat. We have to say a big thank you to Manscaped, who are currently sponsoring the show. So you can get yourself one of these things, a Lawnmower 4.0. And Manscaped are currently the #1 choice brand for men's below the waist grooming and are trusted by over 2 million men worldwide. You can get yourself 20% off as well as free shipping anywhere in the world using the code FOREVER on manscaped.com. Go and check them out. The more that you guys will support them, the more that they'll support us, the more we can provide you quality content and get yourselves closer to the game than ever before. So please go and check out manscaped.com. Use the code FOREVER. Get yourself a young 20% off discount as well as free shipping worldwide. Right. So who are in the comments? I'm seeing Tian Vandenberg. Good evening, Stephen. Contender says, how was your birthday over the weekend? Yeah, so that's why I haven't seen you guys in a couple of days. So I took the weekend off. Had to celebrate the young 25-year sort of milestone. Halfway to 50. Feeling a little bit old, but it was a fantastic weekend actually. So Contender, thanks for asking. I had a really good night on Saturday night where we bought a keg and got through a lot of beer. Sunday was with the family, which was chilled. So it was a very nice weekend. Nice to get away. But I missed you guys. On the watch along on Saturday. It was good to see that you guys really did support Lecanyo and you guys had a fantastic watch along there and then. But so much is currently happening. We've got so much to talk about in terms of the sort of rugby world. And I've actually had a really good week. I've had a very good week. And as much as, the Rugby Championship was a little bit everywhere, the Sigma Lions out of the Currie Cup, and all that's sort of happening. I've had quite a good week, actually. I got vaccinated on Monday. Well, first sort of dose on Monday, which was quite cool. I was out for dinner tonight earlier, which was quite cool. It's Wednesday, so we're already halfway to the weekend. No Wednesday rugby, which is a bit strange. Usually we sort of just finishing a live watch along of whatever Currie Cup was happening on Wednesday night. But none of that. So yeah, we are live for a new show on the Wednesday, which is a genuine news show. And it's been a while since we've done this sort of a new show, because I think during the sort of the Lion series, it kind of be the weekly sort of news shows kind of became just a chat about whatever that's happening in the Lion series. So we are back with our genuine news show tonight, which is quite cool. It's nice to be able to sort of get back. But we've got so much to talk about and so much happening within SA Rugby, within World Rugby and stuff like that, and talking mostly about sort of the Rugby Championship. And we'll sort of discuss a little bit about the video I put out this morning, talking about how are Sanzar disrespecting the Springboks and the All Blacks. And we'll talk about that because I think that we've had some interesting feedback. Some people saying that, we're reading too deep about it. Some people saying that, that maybe I was kind of right with what I was saying. So we'll talk a little bit about that and sort of get your feedback sort of as we go. But in terms of the comments, I see Grant Swartz here. Good evening, Honey Nell. Contender says we should do a squad prediction 23 on Monday Night Live. I'm not sure which squad you're talking. I mean, talking about the Springbok squad, then we can do that. But if you're talking about the challenge, sorry, not the challenge, the champions match, that'll also be quite fun. We'll talk about the champions match as well. I'm very, very keen. I'm very interested to sort of see what people will vote for and where we're gonna go with the champions match. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But we're gonna start with the rugby championship because that is the title of the video. Is it the right call? Is going to Australia been the right sort of call from Sanzar? Should we be going to Australia? And there's quite a few sort of dimensions or layers rather to kind of sort of get through in terms of the rugby championship. Because a week ago we were talking about the fact that South Africa, Europe, and Australia, more specifically Queensland, were sort of in contention, and that's sort of where we were going to see the rugby championship being played out. So they have decided to keep it in Australia. They will be going to Queensland, which is I mean, I suppose it's about right, really, because that was sort of the original call. And in terms of plans, it's a lot easier to sort of move things within a country and say, right, well, we were going to have it at Perth, but we're now going to move it to Queensland and sort of keep things in place. It's a lot easier for that, for example, than to move to South Africa, than to move to Europe. But the problem is that there are now sort of talks, or for example, there are now currently issues within Queensland itself in terms of new restrictions. So, for example, today I was reading a story by The Guardian, talking about the fact that within Queensland they've actually banned people on moving from interstate travel. So you can't come from, for example, like New South Wales into Queensland because of the issues with COVID cases across provinces. So, now people are talking about the fact that will we actually be able to go over to Queensland? Will Springboks, will Argentina, will the Pumas be able to get into Queensland? Or will they have to sort of quarantine elsewhere and then move there and stuff like that? Now, I'm not saying I've heard this. I'm just saying that, the fact that, Queensland have sort of closed their sort of interprovincial borders in many ways, is that going to potentially affect the way that the competition will sort of be structured? And at the moment, the idea is that the game will happen, the third Bledisloe Cup will happen next weekend between Australia and New Zealand in Perth. And after that, the rest of the games will happen in Queensland. Now, I put out a video this morning and it's been sort of mixed reviews. And I was talking about the fact that are Sanzar disrespecting, and I'll put the word sort of disrespecting there, South Africa and New Zealand, in the way that the fixtures are scheduled. And I want to know what you guys think, because I think that it's very much, I'm very interested to sort of see where you guys are sitting. But at this stage, the fixtures have been released. And at the moment, and even the fixtures themselves are quite contradicting, because the Sanzar website has the press release. And basically, after the third Bledisloe Cup game, which is on the 4th of September, the rest of the games will be double headers, which means that both the Australia versus South Africa games, both the South Africa versus New Zealand games, those 4 weeks will all be double headers at the same stadium on the same day. So, for example, it'll be like South Africa versus New Zealand. So let's put it the first 2 weeks. The first 2 weeks will be New Zealand versus Argentina at, let's say, 4 o'clock. And then it will be South Africa versus Australia at 7 o'clock. Same stadium, same day, same crowd. Double header. So you buy tickets and you get 2 matches. So we all understand what a double header is. The problem is, at the moment, according to the press release, the last 2 weeks will be South Africa versus New Zealand and then Australia versus Argentina. Double headers, same night, same day, same stadium, same sort of crowd. And the whole point of what we were talking about earlier was, is it kind of disrespectful, the fact that there are double headers, for example? And, the fact that the next time the Springboks play the All Blacks is the 100th test between the two nations. So if we're being very honest, we probably know and we probably all accept that South Africa and New Zealand are, it's the biggest rivalry in rugby, isn't it? Let's be honest. South Africa versus New Zealand, I mean, from the 1995 World Cup through to now, the biggest international game every single year is South Africa versus New Zealand. I know the Bledisloe Cup's big, and I respect the Bledisloe Cup, and I appreciate it, and I think that Australia are doing, what sort of shows you how big the Bledisloe Cup is the fact that Australia often sort of manage to sort of pitch up when it matters, and despite no matter what sort of Australian side it is, when it comes to the Bledisloe Cup, they suddenly pitch up and play rugby. But South Africa versus New Zealand has always been the biggest international match. Now, the 100th match between the biggest rivalry in rugby could potentially be a curtain raiser. And what I mean by curtain raiser is that it could literally be a 4:00 game ahead of the Australia versus the Argentina game at a 6:30 or a 6 or a 7 o'clock. Is that doing this game of such big importance justice? That was sort of my gist of this morning's video, and that's what I want to hear what you guys think. Are we doing such a significant game justice if it does become a curtain raiser, or even if it's not a curtain raiser, even if it's a second game, a one of two games? Because I've been to double headers. I've been to days where you've got two matches at the same time, or two matches following on from each other. And let's be honest, they're never the same significance. I've been to games where a Super Rugby game would have an SA Under 21 game before, or various games, stuff like that. Maybe we had like an international game, which had a Currie Cup game before. And at the end of the day, if you have a 3 o'clock and a 5 o'clock fixture, the 5 o'clock fixture is always more important, because at the end of the day, you don't want to watch South Africa versus New Zealand, this epic 100th test match we've all been waiting for, like incredible encounter. And then when it's done, you then go, right, well, let me go get a beer, what a bit of time, and then we're going to watch Australia versus Argentina. I just kind of feel that it kind of sort of waters it down a little bit. Watching two matches in a row are never as intense as going to a match, doing all that travel for one particular 80-minute display. So that was sort of the point we're going to make. Is it watering down this match by having it as part of a double header, as having it as a curtain raiser potentially, depending on if they put the game before or after Argentina versus Australia? And some people are saying that we must just be grateful for rugby, and I understand that sort of argument. I can also get behind that. At the end of the day, we shouldn't be complaining, and if we get rugby, we get rugby, and I agree with that. I agree with that to a certain point. The fact that the Rugby Championship is happening is great, but I don't want to see a match. I mean, just think about if the 100th match between the Springboks and New Zealand or the All Blacks, if it was happening at Dunedin, think about the event. If it was happening at Ellis Park, think about the event. We'd be talking about pre-match whatevers. If it's music artists, if it's lightning show, I mean like lighting shows or fireworks or something, there would be such a big sort of deal made about the 100th test. There'd be fireworks, there'd be big flags, there'd be like this is the 100th test, this is the big event, this 80 minutes is going to be this massive sort of vibe. I don't think we will get that with a double header. I just don't, because whatever you have to do for one match, you have to do for the other. And even if they then say, right, well, fair enough, it's such a big match, we'll put you second. As someone who's been to a double header, I mean, I went to, I think it was South Africa versus Argentina at FNB Stadium about quite a while ago, actually, because I wasn't at varsity yet. But they had a Bafana game followed by a Rugby Championship game. And I can tell you right now that Bafana game, it was half full, people were sort of rolling in, and then the event was Argentina, but it definitely wasn't the same vibe as when I went to go and watch the Springboks versus Argentina in at the Nelson Mandela Bay Stadium, and it was one big sort of game, and that's what you're there for. You arrive, you drink, you have a good time, and we're all waiting for that 80 minutes. It's just not the sort of same. And I think the point I'm sort of making, and the point we're trying to sort of get to is it been the right decision to go to Australia? Because the problem is, and some people were saying in the comments, the fact that rugby isn't the biggest thing in Australia, it's not the number one sport. The reason that there might be double headers is the fact that you can't fill stadiums. For example, they're saying that they might not be able to fill a stadium for Argentina versus New Zealand. You might not be able to fill a stadium for New Zealand versus South Africa. I personally would be surprised if you can't fill a stadium for New Zealand versus South Africa. But given the fact that there are these potential issues with Queensland in terms of their COVID restrictions and not letting people into their province and potentially sort of patching around a bit of a lockdown, if they can't fill the stadiums unless they go with a double header, if there are these sort of issues, people talking about scheduling issues with, National Rugby League and, Aussie rules and stuff like that. Have we made the right decision to go to Australia? Would it have been better to have maybe gone to Europe and said, right, South Africa versus New Zealand, 100th test, Twickenham, 60,000 fans? Would that have been a bigger occasion? Was that feasible? And some people have been saying that the reason it's double headers, the reason they're playing at the same stadium has been sort of the buyer bubble. But there's been no confirmation just yet what the buyer bubble actually will be. We're not sure if we're talking about a very strict buyer bubble. We're not sure if we're talking about, a bit like the British and Irish Lions series, that's sort of very strict. You can only come sort of in and out of training and stuff like that. Because generally, from what I've read, Australia and New Zealand have been very much, you kind of go into lockdown, you reduce the cases, you go back to normal. There hasn't, I know last year during the Tri-Nations or whatever it was, I think it was Tri-Nations, it was quite a strict bubble. I mean, Mario Ledesma was talking about the fact that it was like you would go to training and you go back to your room. You go to training, you go back to your room. You'd have to have team meetings whilst in the same hotel on Zoom. So there actually hasn't been confirmation on exactly what sort of buyer bubble we're talking about. But, if that is the case, is having all four teams in the same environment at the same time, is that as safe as if you, for example, had to say, because what I was basically alluding to was maybe you have South Africa versus Australia, 2 games at, let's call it the Suncorp Stadium. And they play Suncorp Stadium. And the same weekend, you have New Zealand versus Argentina at the Seabus Stadium, the Gold Coast. And just sort of creating 2 different events instead of sort of combining them into one sort of double header. And I don't know. I'm interested to see what you guys have to say. I just feel that as soon as you sort of say it's a double header, it kind of loses the significance. It kind of becomes a bit like 7-ish almost, where you've got these like several games in a day, as opposed to you will travel, you will pay, you will be there for one 80-minute game. So let me know what you think. I'm gonna go through the comment stuff like now. So Tian van den Berg says, excited for the championship match, backline of Ulrich, Buthelezi, and Klaba. We'll go through that in a little bit later. Ruan says, how's it, Brew? I'm voting Nas Buerta out of retirement. Jake Schroeder says, as long as we get rugby, I'm not that bothered. Any news on Rusty scandal? Nothing yet. That's in theory, that hearing should be taking place either this week or next week. Ratcliffe says, I wouldn't say Sanzar is disrespecting anyone because the All Blacks versus SA games are the last 2 games. New Zealand, if they really wanted, it could have matches over there. Well, that's the thing, because the press release had those 2 games as the first 2 games, and then their fixtures on the Sanzar website then has them as the last 2 games. So there actually hasn't been any confirmation officially as to which of those games will actually happen first or last. If it is last, you can sort of sit there and say, well, they've done them best within the situation. But we haven't had confirmation of that just yet. Contender says we can do for both teams playing in the game. Example, vote for Kitshoff or Inyakane versus the Ox and 1 and 17 jerseys, or back 3 beef between Vasim and Pimpy, and should he go back to 14? Yeah, so I think maybe next week, I'm trying to think now. So it's probably the week after Monday, the 6th, I'd imagine, September, on Monday Night Live. Maybe we'll do a sort of, which sort of Springbok side would you like to see? Tim van den Berg says Sanzar is looking less like a partnership and more like Game of Thrones with each passing day. Taylor says we could do double headers for World Cup before South Africa versus Ireland or Scotland. We can do a Zimbabwe versus Romania in the second tier World Cup. But you see, I think that kind of concept sort of shows you that there's always a significance towards who plays first, who plays second. And I know it's a bit archaic, but we were all at school, and it was always you build up towards the first team, you build up towards the best game of the day. As RN8 says, isn't the bigger game always the second game. In school, the first team game was always last. And that's kind of the whole point. Is it, if you do say, right, Argentina versus Australia, Argentina versus New Zealand, followed by South Africa versus Australia. South Africa versus Australia is the main event. And moving on to that, if you then do the same thing, imagine putting South Africa versus New Zealand as the curtain raiser in inverted commas. It's just not right, isn't it? It doesn't feel right. Matthew Dixon says home crowds are always going to believe their team is more important than any other, even if the stats prove otherwise. It all depends on the home game, though neutral will think this is heaven. And I understand that. I think it's a very good point. But even though that Australia will feel that the game against Argentina is more important, how depressing is it that the 100th match between the two greatest rugby nations of all time, and they statistically are, that becomes a curtain raiser. This is where we're getting at. And I know it sounds like a small thing to have an issue about, but it's just sad. As Katie Dixon says, binging matches is like we binge Netflix. Grant Swartz saying, I think making the 100th Bok versus All Blacks match a curtain raiser is purely a business decision. It's the only way to get bums in the seats in an Aussie rugby match. Saying that way people will stay for the Aussie game. And that's sad, the fact that you've had to use what should have been a massive celebration of the two of the best rugby sides or rugby nations or rugby unions or fraternities of all time. And it kind of gets reduced to as that's a little exhibition on the side so that we can get people to come and watch Australia versus Argentina. It's tough. And it is the situation we sort of find ourselves in. Ruan says, I think tough time calls for tough decisions. I would rather have Saturday game and Sunday game instead of double header, but times are strange. I do understand your viewpoint though. Well, that's the thing, I think even if it was, as I said, even if you have to stay with the same stadiums, doing a Saturday and a Sunday or a Friday night game, Saturday game, just making it its own event. Huckler says, I agree. I'd love to have a vibe for the 100th game, but at the end of the day, we're living during COVID, so not as easy to pull off. Contender says it's purely to try and get people to enjoy Aussie rugby because of their hiding versus New Zealand. Iran 8 says I would also prefer Boks and All Blacks on the Saturday and Oz versus Argentina the next day rather than double header. Rudy Pedro says South Africa versus New Zealand is obviously of no importance to Australia since they play that game first. It's disrespectful. And saying, imagine South Africa versus New Zealand with a sea of Australian jerseys watching. That sickens me. And Lungi says, I wonder how we would feel as South Africans if the role was switched. Like if we hosted and New Zealand versus Australia was celebrating their 100th. Look, it's a very good point. And that kind of sort of brings a little bit of neutrality. But what we saw, for example, in the first two games down in South Africa, the first rugby championship game was South Africa's home game. As a result, small details. During the first game in the rugby championship between South Africa and Argentina, it was South Africa's home game. As a result, the backdrops were South Africa sponsors. The ball, for example, that they used was South African branded. The name on the score sheet was South Africa first. The second test, for example, was the Argentina home game. As a result, when Sia Khaleesi and Jacques Nienaber gave their post-match press conference, there was an Argentina background. They had Argentina signs, they had Argentina sponsors backgrounds. The ball that they used for that test was all branded Argentina. It was basically everything was Argentina except for the fact that they were in South Africa at the Nelson Mandela Bay Stadium. So, if you're going to have that sort of attitude, maybe you could say, listen, even if it's just for the one, this is the 100th game between New Zealand versus South Africa. We have to make this game special. So let's ensure that the second game, that we pull up the stops and that we make sure that what should have been one of the biggest games in the history of rugby feels like one of the biggest games in the history of rugby. So I don't think it's an ideal situation. I think that as much as I probably wouldn't have liked to have seen it to go on, what the problem is as well? I actually just don't have much time for Australia sport at the moment. We are talking about the country that's cricket team refused to come into South Africa. That basically, so Australia cricket refused to come to South Africa and play cricket, despite us doing everything they asked for, and then in the same month said, if you want to, you can come to Australia and you can play the entire Lions series in Australia. We'll host the Springboks. You can play your warm-up games against the Australian sides. We're happy to do that. So, for example, some people were saying that we must thank Australia for hosting them, and I'm not thanking them. I'm sorry, I'm not thanking them. I don't think Australia are doing anybody a favor by hosting the series. The reason that they are hosting the Rugby Championship is because they're going to make money off it. They can sell tickets. They can sell TV rights. They get to sort of they get the advertising. So I don't think it's a case of Australia going, you know what, chaps, we'll take one for the team and we'll host the series here. It's not that at all. Australia are hosting the Rugby Championship because they can make money off it, because they can put bums on the seats, they can charge tickets, they can build rugby. I don't. So let's not get that mixed. I don't think Australia are not doing any nation a favor by hosting it. We were happy to host as well. We said, come to South Africa. We can't have fans, but we'll host you guys. We'll put you in hotels. We'll give you training facilities. We can have the Rugby Championship here. So let's also sort of not get it sort of twisted. We know that we could have had it here. We know that there were options in Europe, and I'm pretty sure they would have been happy to have it as well. So Australia are not doing us a favor by hosting us. So I'm not going to sit there and thank Australia, for example, for hosting us. I'm not going to say I don't want to sit there and say that they're being, that I don't like them for it. But they're not doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. They're doing it because there is financial, benefit. JD says, let's remember in Oz, rugby union is dying. Their top two sports are Aussie rules, then rugby league. So they are desperately trying to keep rugby union alive. Let's hope so for rugby's sake. And that's the problem. The fact that they can't. Basically, the implication is that Australia cannot sell South Africa versus New Zealand. I can tell you right now, if you had played the Springboks versus Australia in London, in Dublin, in Murrayfield, in Cardiff, you could pack a stadium. You could say South Africa versus New Zealand in Wales, you would pack the Millennium Stadium. I think you would. I genuinely think you would pack a stadium. I think you'd pack a stadium anywhere in the UK. France, I'm not convinced. Maybe you would. Maybe you wouldn't. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not sure you'd pack the entire Stade de France. But I think you would pack Twickenham. I think if you said New Zealand versus South Africa, 100th test in Twickenham, I think you'd pack it. I genuinely would. Whereas they seem that they're unsure they would be able to pack it in Australia, which kind of sort of makes you wonder, was it the right choice? Ruan says, yes, Twickenham would have been 1,000 times better than Aussie's Karuk, man. Are you drinking Gatorade? No, it's just water. This is just the only bottle I had available. Matthew Dixon says, would have been amazing if the Rugby Championship was hosted by Japan or France for neutrality and build-up for World Cup 2023. Kenny Coonan, good evening, says New Zealand have absolutely disgraced themselves and the sport by refusing to play further matches. Argentina never complained about traveling anywhere and do their job, but Argentina never, ever rock the boat, don't they? You talk about Pichot and the fact that he wants to revolutionize world rugby and he wants to make it better for tier 2 nations. Argentina have never rocked the boat. They get along with it. Mario Ledesma was always like, if we have to play in South Africa, we'll play in South Africa. If we have to play in Europe, we'll play in Europe. We're not going to get home games. If we have to play in Australia, we'll play in Australia. So, yeah, there has been a little bit of New Zealand saying, no, we're not going to play. And we've seen South Africa saying, well, we'll come here. We don't really mind playing. But New Zealand have definitely not done themselves a lot of good by the fact that they've sort of taken on, Sanzo and sort of made quite a lot of objections against them. So it's been sort of an interesting time, really. Contender says, new anthem for Australia. Australians, let us get thrashed for we are ugly. Yeah, it's a strange situation with Australian rugby, isn't it? Kenneth Coonan says, shows what happens when any tier 1 nation does what they want. Grant Swart says, Oz is totally taking advantage of the situation. This is all Andy Marino's fault. It makes me sick that he once wore the Stormers jersey. And Katie Dixon says, if what I've read is correct, New Zealand is kind of in full red alert mode because their COVID headcount got out of control and there was a botched cover-up, and add that to the rugby politics. And Honey now says, is it me or does the Aussies hate the box and it's very selfish commentary? I don't know. I think the strange thing, and almost it's not amusing. I don't think it's a laughing matter. New Zealand are currently in a full lockdown because of a couple of COVID cases. And, we sat there as sort of South Africans thinking, oh, well, imagine we had to go into a lockdown because of their cases. But I was actually quite amazed looking at Australia and looking at New Zealand, particularly in New Zealand, how poor their vaccine rollout has been. And that kind of sort of made me realize why they're sort of going into like a full lockdown because of a couple of COVID cases. Because if you look at New Zealand, I mean, we're talking about a country that has a population of what, like 5 million people? And yet they have vaccinated just 37% of their population, well, fully vaccinated 21% of their population, which is just over 1 million people. So it's quite strange that for a country which is so small, so in many ways sort of thought of as first world and have so many sort of resources, that they've actually had a really, really poor vaccine rollout. I mean, they fully vaccinated 21, as Chris White says, 22% of the people. If we look at South Africa's vaccine rollout, we have vaccinated, fully vaccinated 8.8% of our people, which is 5.1 million people. I mean, New Zealand only had to vaccinate 5 million people. So if New Zealand had vaccinated as many people as South Africa has, they'd be 100% fully vaccinated. And in theory, wouldn't have to be going into lockdown. So that was quite sort of interesting. So it's kind of weird, actually, that we sort of, especially as sort of South Africans, we were so ready to go over there and kind of assume that they've got things under control, but they don't. Australia in many ways were the same, where they were sort of going into lockdowns all the time and not really sort of doing a mass vaccine rollout. And then you look at the UK and parts of Europe, where because they've had such a successful vaccine rollout. I mean, I think the UK have vaccinated like 60% of the population. Let me get some stats so I don't lie to you. UK have vaccinated 62.9%, fully vaccinated 62.9% of the entire population. As a result, and this is one of the main reasons that I got vaccinated, and that I would really, really encourage you to all get vaccinated. If you have watched the Premier League, I watched Manchester United play in a packed out Old Trafford this weekend. We're talking 60,000 fans. All I want to do is get back in the stadium. All I want to do is go and watch the Springboks at Ellis Park with 65,000 South Africans drinking beer, watching their side. So getting the jab means we can move towards that. And that's what we're seeing in the United Kingdom. And that's why in many ways, I think maybe we should have gone to Europe. We could have played in front of full stadiums. You wouldn't have had to have worried as much about sort of the COVID cases, because in Australia and New Zealand, because their vaccine rollouts haven't been as big, they get a couple of cases and they're like, right, we're lockdowning. We're red alert, because the UK have said, right, well, we vaccinated 62.9% of our population. Masks off. We're gonna live. We're gonna go on. And we'll sort of cope with it. So it's quite an interesting sort of thing, and that's why, look, it's your decision and stuff like that. But I got my first dose on Monday. If you're in South Africa, please, I'd really like to encourage you to go and get vaccinated. Let's try and get back into stadiums. Let's try and go and watch rugby together. I want to have Forever Sports meetups. I want to say to you guys in Johannesburg, right, we're going to have a Forever Sports meetup at this place, and we can all go meet up there. But until we start moving back to normal, which will only happen once we're all vaccinated, that's not really going to happen. Kenny Cooney says, here in Ireland, over 70% of the population are vaccinated. Our population is close to the same as New Zealand. No, it's not hard. Chris White says, but the jab does not mean that. They simply moved to the goalposts. It's not about COVID. It's all about political power. And they have demand. Well, the thing is, South Africa have always said that once they vaccinate, I think it was like 60, I think they wanted to do 20 million people, we can start moving towards normal. So, look, if they do that, if they don't do that, we'll only know once we get there. So, yeah, I got vaxxed. My arm's still a little bit tender from Monday. I want to get back to stadiums. I want to go back to normal. I want to go and watch my Lions play. I want to watch the Sigma Lions get thrashed at Ellis Park. That's what I want. So if getting a jab means I can do that, then we can move. Honey now says, so the Boks playing on Sunday on the 12th September, like 7 in the morning. They haven't confirmed times, but we are playing the 12th September. Grant Salt says, here in the desert, the vaccine has been excellent. People are here starting to go for their booster jabs already. Yeah, that's what we want. But yeah, so I'm going to move on from the Rugby Championship because we've got so much to talk about in terms of rugby news. So second of all, technically. Second of all, Ian Foster has signed a new contract. So the New Zealand coach, Ian Foster, known as Fozzie, has officially signed a new contract until 2023, the World Cup. And it's quite interesting because I think a lot of people last year weren't particularly convinced, especially when they lost to Argentina. But Ian Foster has played 10 games, or has managed 10 games, or coached 10 games as the All Blacks coach, of which half of them have actually come against Australia. So he's played 10 games, he's won 7, drew 1, and lost 2. So he's operating at a 70% win percentage. The All Blacks have scored 413 points underneath them and conceded 138. So, I mean, I don't know if... I don't know. I look at Ian Foster and I look at that All Black side and I don't think that they're like sensational side, but I think some people were very upset that he got a contract extension. And I must admit, I don't look at that New Zealand side and think that they're a bad side. I think that they're I don't think that they're the generation that they had before, but let's be honest. Not every generation is going to have a loose trio of Jerome Kano, Richie McCaw, and Kieran Reid. So I think I don't think there's an issue with him signing a new contract. He's won 70% of his games. He's only lost 2 in 10. He's drawn 1. He lost 1 game against Argentina, 1 game against Australia, but he's won 3 games against Australia. They're scoring points. They're not looking terrible. I don't really see the issue. I'm sort of surprised that people are surprised that he got a contract extension. So interested to see what everybody else says. But yeah, so. JD says, great show, a chance of doing some live Zoom interviews with ex-players, ex-refs, etc. We're working on it. We want to move towards sort of that situation, stuff like that. So hopefully we can move towards doing that. Katie Dixon says everyone is so mad about Ian Foster extension. Yikes. Yeah, as I said, I don't really understand it. I don't think that they've been looking bad underneath them. I just think it's not as talented of a New Zealand generation as there was a year ago, which is saying a lot given the fact that some fantastic players in the New Zealand side, but they don't have Ma Nonu and Conrad Smith. They don't have Sonny Bill Williams and Conrad Smith. They don't have, Dan Carter. They don't have Jerome Kano, Richie McCaw, Kieran Reid. It was always going to be a changing of the guard, and they're still playing some tremendous rugby. Aaron Ed says there's no love lost between SC and Oz rugby, in my opinion, and it seems that to me that we have more respect for the All Blacks than they have for us. Yeah, I don't think there is much between South Africa and New Zealand when it comes to, to South Africa and Australia. When it comes to New Zealand, I don't know. Sorry, I had a couple of beers earlier and my stomach's hating me for it. Aiden Barnshall says, I got vaxxed yesterday. My arm is sore as well. Lol. I'm totally with you. I want to get back to Sam's. Yeah, 100%. My arm, literally, that's the only effect I've had. My arm here is just bloody sore. But apart from that, I've been pretty fine. I'd love a Fair Sports meetup. So would I. All I want to do is be able to say to my 6,400 subscribers, there must be 20 of you in Joburg. Let's go and have some beers somewhere. Hopefully beers on me if things are going well. If you guys go and support Manscaped, maybe Manscaped can sponsor some beers and we can have a bit of a meetup, which would be cool. Lungi says, I'm delighted. New Zealand has extended Foster's contract. There we go. And Katie Sixton says, everyone's raised it. Yeah, look, Scott Robertson has been fantastic, hasn't he? He just sort of never seems to be really moving. But yeah, look, I don't think Foster's a bad player, a bad coach at all. I think Scott Robertson is the inevitable next choice, but I don't think he's that old. And he keeps extending at Crusaders. He keeps extending with New Zealand Rugby. So he's 47 years old. He will be the next All Blacks coach. I have no doubt in 2 years' time, he'll be 49. He will be the next All Blacks coach. But they wanted to promote within. If Foster, at the end of the day, if Foster doesn't win the World Cup, he gets replaced. If he wins the World Cup, he probably still gets replaced, to be honest. Scott Robertson has been the best coach in New Zealand for a long time. So I think we all probably know that, that he was the obvious choice in many ways, but he's not going to be there for a long time. He's 56 years old. He's going to be 58 in a couple of years' time, and we'll move to Scott Robertson. We all kind of know that Scott Robertson will eventually take over. Just sort of a matter of time, isn't it? Honey now says, what will happen if Oz beat us twice? Ooh, let's not sort of throw that out there. I'd rather not think about that, to be honest. I don't know. If they beat us twice, we kind of have to sort of reassess. Aaron 8 says, very surprised, thought they would have gone Scott Robertson ages ago. Will you visit Thornton Park in Munster, play the Lions, one of the best stadiums that have an unreal Kane Coon? Genuinely, all I want to do, and me and Lakanya were having this conversation, that all we want to do is be able to jump on a plane and go overseas and go and watch. Like for me, to go overseas to watch the Lions play Munster in Ireland, or play Benetton in Italy. That's like all I want to do. Like I've been wanting to go on an outgoing series with the Springboks to Europe since I was about 12 years old. So I would love to do that. And I would love to be able to get to a point where we can move and we can do a vlog and say, right, this is what it's like to go overseas. This is what it's like to go and go and see a home game at Munster, go see a home game at Leinster and stuff like that. So it's definitely very, very high on the bucket list. I'd love to do it, and there are a lot of people over there. We've got a lot of subscribers over there, and I mean, it would be a dream, a genuine dream of mine to go over there and have a Forever Sports meetup at a freaking Irish pub. And I mean, how cool would that be for us to go to some pub in the middle of Ireland and chat to people who I've been chatting with in the comments for months and stuff like that. So it's in the works. We don't really have the funding to do it now, but in the next couple of years, you never know. Maybe we'll be able to do a trip over there. So I'll never say never. I really, really do want to do it. I want to go traveling. The fact that I can't go and travel 20 minutes up the road and go watch the Lions is killing me. So I really want to go overseas and be able to watch games in Ireland, in England, in stuff like that. It will be so much fun. So we'll probably start putting polls out. Actually, once we've got a bit of budget, maybe we'll start putting polls out and sort of seeing where is everyone, and we can go and meet up in various places. So yeah, I mean, there's 47 of you guys in the comments. Where are you guys? If you guys aren't in South Africa, no, even if you're in South Africa, where are you guys? Where would be a good place to do a meetup? Have we got 20, 30 people in Joburg and we can do a Joburg meetup? Do we have to go make a trip to Cape Town? Do we need to go to Durban? Do we all have to go to Bahrain to see Grant? Where are we going? Let me know in the comments. Grant says, use us Manscaped rounds and do a meetup there in the desert. Look, Grant Swartz, if you're hosting, we're coming. Eh? We're coming. Careful. And I've already told you that you're going to have to meet us at the airport for the Lions tour next up. So you also need to start saving those. I don't know what currency you have in Bahrain. Albert van Lingen says, Oz beating SA, what you smoking? Hopefully some bad stuff, because we can't be having that. The Danaruka says, RN8, understand it's the All Blacks admin who are disrespectful. Normal Kiwis are not like that. It's funny that, actually, because a lot of people have said, please stop saying it's the All Blacks. It's not the All Blacks, it's the administrators. But unfortunately, they're kind of all under the same umbrella, aren't they? Katie Dixon says, I think raise is inevitable as long as no other country offers him a boatload of cash. I mean, I'm sure he must have had some big offers. The fact, I think he's had about 3 or 4 contract extensions in the last 4 years. And I imagine that's because so many people want him. Matthew Dixon says, maybe Russia should convince Razor to coach the Box. Probably won't happen, but would be interesting. Can he come to the Lions, maybe? Aiden Bonding also says, Ian Foster and Dave Rennie are solid coaches. Yeah, I also quite like Dave Rennie. Right, so Katie Dixon says, Irish pub meetup. Well, there we go. We've got somebody advocating for the Irish meetup. JD says Cape Town at the Greenpoint Stadium. Maybe a trip down for Stormers versus Lions. Matthew Dixon says PTA. So we can do PTA. It's not that far. Eden Bonding also says it's politics that's killing rugby. Also, are these rule changes necessary? I feel like rugby was fine as it was. Yeah, I'm not a fan of them, but we'll sort of see, I suppose, how it goes. Albert van Lingen says Loftus Bar, Pretoria. Aiden says I'm in Joburg. Well, there we go. JD says all in Cape Town. I can now walk. Joburg or Grahamstown. Joburg. Look, I'll be in Grahamstown at the end of the year. So there's a couple of people in Grahamstown. Obviously, Lacanyo's in Grahamstown. So we'll do it. I mean, I'll be in Grahamstown in September, hopefully. So maybe when I'm in Grahamstown, I'll let you guys know. If there's anybody is in Grahamstown, we can have a meetup. But I reckon once the United Rugby Championship is going, we must do a Joburg meetup. see who's around there. Maybe do a bit of a trip to Pretoria, watch a Bulls game or something. I'm keen. I'm keen. I think that this last year it's been so cool to chat rugby with you guys online. That'll be so cool to be able to sit down and meet you and not just have an avatar that you sort of chat to and stuff like that, or a profile picture, but be able to actually sit down and chat to the people that I've been chatting with for the last year. But moving on to the sort of the rest of the news, a couple of things I want to talk about. So first of all, we've sort of talked about Ian Foster, but sort of a bit closer to home. I'm going to end off with the Players' Choice Awards. But we'll talk about the Sigma Lions. Oh my goodness, those bloody Lions. Yeah, the Lions are a bit of a disaster, aren't they? JD says a meetup and live show. Yeah, we could do that. Grant Suarez says, hopefully when the play gets better, I'll be back in Cape Town in December, so up for the meetup. Well, Grant Suarez, if you're in Cape Town in December and they're in and around the sevens, I will genuinely make a mission just to come and say hi. So maybe we can do that for maybe we could do a Cape Town 7 sort of vibe in and around then or whenever. I mean, Cape Town's not too far, but otherwise the Joburg chaps, we must do a URC meetup and watch some games there. Honey says we just all need to hit the gym. Eesh. I don't know. It requires exercise. Aiden says, I'd be very keen to watch a URC game with you guys. 100%. Lions improvement. Hold the faith. Well, let's talk about the Lions, shall we? Let's talk about the Lions. So the Lions are going to get a new coach. They are going to get a new coach. We know this. We know that they will get a new coach. It's been confirmed by Real Australia that they are currently looking. And it's a bit of a strange bunch that have kind of been linked. So we're looking at someone that, so according to SA Rugby Mag, look, the current coaching staff, their contracts expire in October. So Cash and Shawnee Rasmus and Warren Whiteley and the bunch, they're all kind of sort of, that expires in October. So Real Australia confirmed that there will be a new coaching setup because we've got Currie Cup starting in January. So these are some of the names that are being touted. And they're all ex-Springboks. But I never liked the fact that that's who your biggest claim to fame. But the names that are being thrown around are the likes of Andre Pretorius, who's currently coaching NW or Pika in the Varsity Cup, as well as the Leopards. Then we've got Albert van den Berg, who is the Griquas assistant coach at the moment. There's Louis Kuhn, who is the national skills coach and the head of the high performance sort of rugby setup. And then there's also a story about the fact that Victor Matfield and Jacques Fourie could be the two coaches. Now, I mean, Victor Matfield coached at the Lions a couple of years back. I didn't really see much of improvement while he was there, to be honest. I don't remember our lineout suddenly getting much better. Apparently, he was offered a contract with the Bulls. He turned it down, but he hasn't coached since. So I don't really want someone who was a consultant at the Lions, hasn't really coached, and now has become a full-time coach. And then Jacques Fourie was the name that was being touted alongside Victor Matfield. Now, look, Jacques Fourie is probably my favorite Springbok of all time. I think if there's probably, as I said, if you had to tell me right now who's your favorite Springbok, I think Jacques Fourie is probably him. Now, he was the USA defense coach back in 2019 for the World Cup. But since then, consultancy for some schools. So would I like to see Jacques Fourie in the Lions coaching setup? I could learn to like it. Would I like to see him as our head coach? Probably not. No, probably not. The Stormers, before they end up with John Dobson, we're going to go for Eddie Jones. The Bulls currently have Jake White. The Sharks, for all that Sean Everett might not have the most experience, they're bringing in Neil Powell. They're bringing in this person. They're bringing in experience from Europe. The Sharks are busy assembling a powerhouse coaching setup. They're after Warren Whiteley. So you think about those sort of coaches, and look, I think the Western Province probably also needs to do a bit of a review. But you look at those coaches, and now the equivalent of that for the Lions is to go after, Andre Pretorius, who's Leopards or NW, or Victor Matfield and Jacques Fourie, who've never really coached that sort of level, or an Albert van den Berg, who, is the Griquas assistant. it's not really the sort of caliber we're talking about, is it? I don't want, and no offense. Look, maybe some of these coaches would prove me wrong, and they probably would. I don't want a Greek who's assistant coach to become the head coach of the Lions United Rugby Championship. It's mean. It's very mean, but it's honest. We're talking about, we're talking about trying to make this side one of the best sides in Europe. That's where this competition is going. We're talking about in a year's time being part of the Challenge Cup, being part of the Champions Cup. So if the Sigma Lions or the Emirates Lions, depending on if we freaking even get a sponsorship, if we want to become one of the best sides in Europe, are these the coaches to do it? And I don't think any of them are, to be perfectly honest. I saw a rumor that Matt Proudfoot is being linked to it. Now, that's somebody I could get behind. If Matt Proudfoot wants to come and coach, that's a big name, though. And I feel that there's two things when it comes to a big name. One, obviously, they're a good coach. Two, attracting players. Ivan van Rooyen talked about the fact that we have to dip into the market. Courtnall Kassan has just signed for the Northampton Saints, as he is one of the two players that were playing in I think it was the 2016 or 17 final, when the Lions were playing really well. The only two players that are still, he was one of three players currently at the Union as part of that setup. The only players remaining after Courtnall Kassan are Ross Quinier, who before the last couple of weeks couldn't get a look in, and Ru Andrea. Now, I read a story about the fact that Courtnall Kassan was fit, was ready, and he was not being picked. He was being overlooked. How are you overlooking Courtnall Kassan? Do we remember the season when Courtnall Kassan scored about flipping 15 tries or something stupid? Like we've just lost Courtnall Kassan, who apparently wasn't good enough according to our current coaching staff to play Currie Cup. But Northampton Saints will go and play him in the Premiership. What is going on there? It is so frustrating. This is what I'm talking about, the fact that I want a big name coach. I want a coach who has been there, who has done that, who has got the credentials. We promoted within, it didn't work. I want to see a big name coach arrive. Jimmy Stonehouse is about as little name as possible, and he's been in and around the block for a long time. And he's as sort of small scale as I would actually like to see at the Sigma Lions. Go and bring Franco Smith back from Italy. If you go and say the ex-Italian coach, ex-Six Nations head coach is coaching the Lions, I can get behind that. You go and tell me, and look, I love Andre Pretorius, who's my idol as number 10 growing up. But you go and tell me that that a Varsity Cup head coach is now the head of the United Rugby Championship franchise, I'm going to be skeptical. I'm going to be brutally honest. I will be skeptical. So it's frustrating. It's very, very frustrating. Mark Julian Lee says you couldn't all fit in my bungalow in Whitney, Oxon, UK. Look, we're willing to try, eh? We're willing to try. If you're willing to try, we're willing to try. We'll operate the bungalows. Grant Soa says, did Jock Free not do a player coach thing in Japan? He might have. It sounds about right. I can neither confirm nor deny, but it sounds about right. Aiden Barding also says, my favorite Springbok player ever is Percy Montgomery. Decent shot. Louis says Buller. Albert van Lingen says, Lions lost the plot completely. They need to get out the checkbook like at the Bulls to spend themselves out of the hole. Agreed. Sean O'Farrell, good evening. Sean says, why not go for an ex-player lens to have in the coaching, an ex-player from Argentina? The problem is if we're going ex-players from Lions. Look, I suppose Jacques Freeze is an ex-player. Andre Pretorius is an ex-player. I mean, Warren Whiteley is an ex-player as well. I'm going to be sad if we lose him. I just want a big name that's been recognized and that's been doing things, Louis says they should try and get Crusaders coach. Look, I would love Scott Robertson. My goodness, I'd personally fund him. I mean, I don't have much money to contribute, but if I could, I would. Graham says they need a coach with big-time experience, even if it's just Pro 14 experience, but many years at the top level. You can't drop a coach in the deep end with a young team in a very tough competition. I'm going to show that. It's exactly right. It is exactly right. The Lions do not have a bad squad, but they've got such a young squad, and they've got minimal experience to help them. You can't have, I'm sorry, Vincent Tutuka is a senior player. He is a senior player in the Lions side. He's 22 years old. He should be focusing on being one of the best players in the park week in, week out, not sitting there helping youngsters adapt. How can you, at 22 years old, be sitting there telling somebody who's 19 years old, listen, this is how you play at professional level, when you're going to go up against World Cup finalists, World Cup players. You're going to be playing against Damien Delendi. You're going to be playing against Island Internationals. You're going to be playing against blooming freaking Johnny Sexton. You're going to play against a World Player of the Year, and now the 22-year-old must help nurture the 20-year-old in terms of this level. It's nonsense. Get some experience in and help these youngsters. There are some incredibly talented players at the Lions, but there's no experience to help them. Aiden says there's no planning and foresight at the Lions right now. Like you said, these other SA franchises are assembling very competitive coaching staff, 100%. Matthew Dixon says Lions need a coaching group. He says head coach Scott Matthew, defense coach Jacques Free, forwards Albert Vandenberg, defense attacking skills Dick Muir. Oh, now you're talking. Warren Whiteley, I'd like to have him there. Keep Sean Erasmus as well. He's a talented coach, but look, I mean, I think Scott Matthew, I'm not quite sure he's ready, but the rest of that I can definitely back. I mean, Scott Matthew is an assistant coach. I would love that sort of vibe. Albert van Lingen says can't believe Skorsan is leaving SA Shores. What a waste. Eden says player retention to the Lions has always been terrible. Jimmy Stone to the Lions would be great. I'm all for that. Where is Ackerman? He's in Japan. Stuart Lancaster. I would take Stuart Lancaster. I would take a lot of people, to be honest. JD says the latest with club rugby. Just asking out of curiosity. So much emphasis on the Box Curry Cup. A channel on DSTV to help expose club rugby would be great. Your thoughts on how to grow club rugby? US van der Westmeisen was brilliant. Miss him. Yeah, look, club rugby. Look, it's a lot better than, for example, club cricket. We've got the Gold Cup, which does sort of operate, but it's difficult, isn't it? Sort of trying to, and I think in general, SA Rugby have done quite a good job at making sort of a big deal of smaller competitions. But I would love to be involved in sort of club rugby or involved in helping exposure for sort of club rugby and stuff like that. We do need to sort of see more of it, but there's the Gold Cup, so I don't think that they're doing terrible things there. But in terms of everything else I wanted to cover, a couple of other stories, not much really to discuss, but just a couple of sort of headlines. It looks like Colby's moving to Toulon. He is currently in talks to sort of leave Toulouse to go to Toulon on a 3-year deal, apparently. I saw talks that the Sharks are also keen, but I just don't see how they can afford it. I mean, South Africa's got a 60 million rand salary cap. Now, you look at something like Andre Pollard, he's earning 20 million rand a year. So he'd be earning a third of the South African salary cap. Now, I know that Cheslin Colby's not earning anything near that, but Damian Willems is one of the better players in the country at earning 5 million rand. And if Cheslin Colby is earning less than that, I'll be very, very surprised. So I don't see how the Sharks, who have just signed Lionel Cornier, Cameron Wright, a blooming Samoan, a Argentina international squad member, Sia Khaleesi, Bongi Manami, I don't see how they could afford Cheslin Colby unless they've got some really weird creative accounting stuff in the corners. I know that the Bulls do that quite a lot. They've got sponsorships. They've got after career options like Skalk Brits. They gave him a job after he was done and stuff like that. So unless the Sharks are being very creative, I don't see how they could ever begin to afford Colby right now. But I did see that rumor, so who knows? He also just signed with Gilbert. Fun fact. He's now part of the Gilbert sponsorship brand. Stedman Gans, the Bulls outside center, has committed to playing 15s rugby. He came out today and said that he's got no intention of going back to the 7 setup, that he will be focusing on the Bulls and trying to make it at 15s level. So that's another sort of number 13 to throw into the pile with the likes of Wanasila Similani, with Jesse Creel, with Lakanya with who else are the good 13s at the moment? Werner Cox coming through quite well. So he said, and I quote, says, my immediate future plan is to focus solely on the Bulls now. I'm definitely finished with sevens for now. It's actually the conversation we had beforehand, and that's where we are now. So yeah, so Stedman Gans will be focusing on 15s, which means that I think we'll see a lot more of him at outside center, which is good to see. I like him. I like Stedman Gans. I think that there are just unbelievable amount of players at the Bulls. I mean, you've got Lionel Mapu, who's playing very good rugby there. But yeah, then the Craven Week's been cancelled, unfortunately, for the second year in a row. SA Rugby confirmed today that all SA Youth Weeks have been cancelled. So no under 16, under 13, or under 18 Craven Week sides. The SA under 18 side was announced today, so you can go and check that out on Super Sports Schools as well as SA Rugby. Very much, it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, we've basically had no rugby during 2021 or 2020, and we've just picked an under 18 side. So Yeah, probably a lot on coaches' input and a lot on expectation and reputation and stuff like that. But yeah, so those are some of sort of the headlines floating around, and then we'll finish up with the Bright Rock Awards. Let me just go through them in the comments. Sean O'Farrell says Stuart Lancaster signed a contract extending with Leinster, but we can throw money or something. Surely, I mean, we've got nice weather. Hayden Podmore says, imagine we could get in Michigan will be so ironic. I'll take anyone these days, to be honest. Grant Swart says, I thought the Colby move was just rumors. Well, I think the move to Toulon is not rumors. To Sharks, I don't see it happening. I just don't see how they could afford it. Barry Green says, what the name of the team that he might go to? We're talking about Colby, it's Toulon. Great asset to the Sharks if it realizes. I don't see it happening. Sharks cooking the books. They have to be cooking the books. If the Sharks sign Colby, there's no ways. If the Sharks sign Colby, there is absolutely no ways that they are sticking to the 60 million rand salary cap. Not a chance. With Khaleesi, with Mbanambi, they've got some big players there. You know, with bringing in a couple of big players, there's no ways that they're sticking within their 60 mil if they're bringing in Colby. You tell me that you're going to pay Colby less than 5 or less than 10 million rand a year. Not a chance. JD says apparently there are some expensive appliances available cheap for resale. Maybe they can raise funds that way. Yeah, look, I mean, Durban, we all know has been operating down there. Louis says if Rusty gets dropped, they should get him. Oh, can you imagine Rusty Russ with the Lions? I actually made this joke the other day, but can you imagine? Jonathan Myberg says, what's the feel in the box playing the remainder of the championship in Australia? I think, to be honest, I don't think we're all particularly happy about it, but we'll kind of just take it, I suppose. But yeah, so the Bright Rock Awards nominees were announced today. I think there's a little bit of recency bias, to be honest. And some people will go after me and say that I'm biased or whatever. But I don't know. I just think that some people haven't been. Some players are there who I don't think have been playing well enough for long enough to sort of warrant the hype that they are getting. So I'm interested to see what you guys have to say about that. But so right, so the forward player of the year for the Player Choice Awards. This is all Bright Rock, by the way. They've been doing this for a while. The 2021 Forward Player of the Year nominations from Bright Rock SA are Sia Khaleesi, Franco Mostert, Evan Lewis, and Eben Etzebeth. Now, my biggest problem with these awards are that it's August. We've had, quick math, 6 Springbok games. So Franco Mostert, Eben Etzebeth. I very much doubt that Bright Rock were watching their European games. You know, I very much doubt that they were watching Franco Mostert in Japan and thinking, yeah, that's in. So it's a little bit strange to me that, first of all, these things are even. I mean, like, you look at Backline Player of the Year, for example, and the nominations are Sullivan Davis, Damien Delende, Edwin van der Merwe, Edwin Cater. So Lekanyo has not been nominated for Backline Player of the Year. Cheslin Colby is borderline one of the best players in the world at the moment, and is not nominated for Backline Player of the Year. And if you're going to go Evan Lewis, you're taking into account club form. So I don't know if there's a specific policy when it comes to Bright Rock Awards, that it's based on rugby played either for the Springboks or within South Africa. But I mean, Edwin Cater for Backline Player of the Year ahead of Lekanyo ahead of Jason Colby, ahead of Damien Delende's there, at least, I suppose. It's just a bit strange, I think, that doesn't seem to be sort of bringing in any club form for overseas-based players. Defender of the Year, Lekanyo Marco van Staden, Ruan Nokia, Branko de Priya. Lekanyo I can go with, Marco van Staden I can go with, Ruan Nokia. Yeah, I suppose I can kind of go with Ruan Nokia. I mean, look, he's been very good. Branko de Priya, I mean, we've hardly seen the Blitzbox. We've barely seen the Blitzbox this year. So I'm quite sure how, best off the bench, Trevor Nyakane. Yeah, back that 100%. Malcolm Marks, Springboks, Vincent Cox, Springboks, Grant Williams. I mean, has Grant Williams been that phenomenal off the bench? The best games I've seen him play, I've seen him start, to be honest. I would put Lizo Koboka there. I think he's probably been. I think Lizo was better off the bench than Trevor was off the bench for the Bulls. Trevor's been better than obviously better than Lizo off for the Box. But I just kind of find this entire to try and have awards now after 6 Springbok games and stuff. It's just a bit of a weird time to have these awards. The love change, most improved player, Jaden Hendrickse, Evan Roos, Jasper Wiese, Lusanda Dumka, who's the Springbok women's captain. I mean, Jasper Wiese for most improved player. Now, they're obviously not, I mean, it says bracket Springbok, so they're not looking at his Leicester Tigers form. Is Jasper Wiese the most improved player after one man of the match performance? I don't know. I just think his entire awards is a bit strange. It's like we're forcing ourselves and having these awards without really having that much rugby to be able to vote upon. Because either keep it local and just say local players, or whilst you have to wait until the rest of the Rugby Championship. At the end of the United Rugby, not the United Rugby Championship. At the end of the Rugby Championship, the Springboks would have played. We've played 6 games so far. We would have played 10 games. Now, after 10 games, we can make awards. If we wait till the end of the year tour, that would be 13 games. Then we can bring Springbok form into this. Can we really say that Jasper Wiese is the most improved player after 4 tests for the Box or 5 tests for the Box or whatever it is? I don't know if we can. Fans' Choice Award is Babalwa Latsha, Springbok Woman, Dwayne Vermeulen, Damian Willemse, and Morne Steyn. Now, who's? I mean, when it says fans' Choice Award, I didn't get a chance to choose. Did you guys get a chance to choose? Are there when it says fans' choice, were they running polls and I just didn't see them? So let me know. Have you voted for a Bright Rock Fans' Choice Award? And then Player of the Year, Sia Khaleesi, Damien Lendi, Cheslin Colby, Frank Hermos, Evan Etzebeth, Lakanya. So Cheslin Colby can be nominated for Player of the Year. He's not in Backline Player of the Year. So am I the only one that just found these awards a little bit strange? I mean, Evan Roos as forward player of the year, most improved. I can go with the most improved. I don't know. And my only bias is, as a Lions supporter, Vintage Tuka should be part of that. I don't think, at the Lions, he's been the best player for the last year. But has Evan Roos, before Vintage Tuka's injury, for example, has there been a better forward who, in terms of week in, week out performance, never lets the team down, is always at the top of their game? Has there been a more consistent player than Vintage Tuka? And I will use the British and Irish Lions game as an example, because against the British and Irish Lions, there were a couple of Stormers players who were playing pretty well and didn't play well against the British and Irish Lions. A bit like the Sharks, a couple of players who were playing pretty well, they didn't pitch up against the British and Irish Lions. Some players did. I thought Werner Koch was sensational against the British and Irish Lions, put him on the map. I thought Pepsi Buthelezi was really good against the British and Irish Lions. I thought Vintage Tuka was fantastic against the British and Irish Lions. So I think Evan Roos has been fantastic, and I think he will make the Springboks. But forward player of the year, are we saying that Evan Roos has been within the top 4 best South African forwards this year? I'm not convinced. Are we saying that Lakanyo and Cheslin Colby are not within the 4 best backline players of the year? Edel van der Merwe. He was good. He hasn't played much in the last 4 months. Top 4 best backline player of the year, including sevens? I'm not convinced. So I don't know. I just think it's a bit of a strange time to be giving awards, and just a couple of players there. I'm just sort of thinking, I don't know. Are they really? So should they be there? Graham says, so I'm going back to some earlier comments. So Graham says that shouldn't the Stormers also be looking for a new coach as well? Probably. Aren't the Sharks backed by Americans? They are backed, so they've got lots of money, but you still have a salary cap. So every single team, every single franchise can only spend 60 million rand on player salaries. They've all got that cap. I reckon it could fall away soon, which will make a big difference. But until then, they've still got that 60 million rand cap. So it doesn't matter if your owner wants to say, I will give you 100 million rand to pay players. You have to stick within that 60 mil. What if Kobe takes less to move to Durban? I mean, he could. I don't think I would, but he could. Jonathan Myberg says players like, let's start with Villy. Do you think Warren White will make a comeback in rugby? No, I don't think so, unfortunately. He pretty much gave an interview last year and said that before he even thinks about playing rugby, he just wants to be able to play with his kids and not be in pain. Pretty heartbreaking thing to hear. So I think he's done, which was very unfortunate. I think he should have been in the World Cup squad. I think he should have been a World Cup winner. Can we make him a retrospective World Cup winner? He's such a nice guy. Jonathan Marburg says Chesney hands down player of the year. Taft de Klerk, it's a very good point. Chesney's rated one of the best wings in rugby at the moment, if not the best. Matthew Dixon says, should we not have a URC type tournament with Africa's top rugby nations, club teams, Namibia, Kenya, Zim, Mozambique, Indonesia, with the 4 SA franchises non the URC? I would love that. I would genuinely love that. If I had Johan Rupert money, if I was a millionaire, I was just dishing out cash. If I owned Leopard Creek, I would do that. I would say, right, chaps, here's a couple of a couple of mil, go and play some rugby. Unfortunately, I don't think we'd ever be able to get the sponsorship to do that, but I would love that sort of concept. Shouldn't the awards be in November after the international tours? Exactly. COVID has shuffled everything around, looks like. Yeah, it's a bit strange. Awards matched everything. Fresh Prince of Johannesburg says, far too soon to be dishing out awards. I agree. Morning the general. Matthew Dix says, agree with Vincent. And Aiden says, I didn't even know the Players of the Year awards was even on what's Bright Rock's Player of the Year. So it's not the official SA Rugby Player of the Year. McGrath Swart says, the people who voted for these awards are the same people who voted for the player rating shows during the British and Irish Lions. You guys let me down. Those awards are a little bit embarrassing, to be honest, to go through those and see what you guys gave some of these players. It was horrendous. 60 million rand, what's that in pounds? It's now you're gonna have to make me expose my currency. 60 mil is the equivalent of 2.9 million pounds. So we've got a salary cap of 2.9 million pounds currently, which, as I said, when you think that Andre Pollard earns like 1.2 million pounds, it's a little bit childish. Pira Gianti, any news on fighting doping offense? I've been trying to find some news on Pira Gianti. I haven't found anything yet. But best believe if I do, I will let you guys know. Good people, it is far longer than the show was supposed to go on with. I'm not that I mind because I could chat with you guys forever. But we are going to call it there. We will be live again on Saturday. We've got 3 watch-alongs. Sean will be back on the channel. He'll be doing Griquas versus Pumas, and I will be doing the Cheetahs versus Bulls and the Stormers or Western Province versus the Sharks. So we'll be live again on Saturday. We might be live on Friday night. We'll wait and see. Apart from that, previews coming your way tomorrow for the Currie Cup this weekend. Please do keep smashing a like. Please do keep subscribing. We're past 6,400 subscribers. So the next thing is to try and get to 7,000 before United Rugby Championship begins. Smash a like on the video. Subscribe. Check out manscaped.com. Use the code forever. The more that you guys support, the more that they will come support us. Basically, if everybody currently watching were to go right now and use forever and go and buy a Manscaped product, we'd see more Manscaped sponsorships, and maybe we might be able to go overseas and go and watch rugby over there. I'm just putting that out there. But yeah, if you can, please do go and support them because they will then support us. Thank you, everybody. Keep safe. Get vaccinated. See you guys on the weekend.